is called The Altar of Memory, A Sense of Arrival, with Kevin A. Browne, Lauren K. Alleyne, and Malene Barnett. This is a three-way conversation and reading, and we hope it'll be, if all goes as planned, it'll be an immersive multimedia arts experience. And the event today asks us, what does it mean to arrive? Not just in place, but in self, in memory, in truth. In this conversation, writer, professor, and photographer Kevin Adonis Browne joins poet Lauren K. Alleyne and artist-writer Malene Barnett to explore memory as method and tenderness as resistance. At the heart of today's discussion is Browne's A Sense of Arrival, a visual and lyrical meditation on Black interiority, Caribbean diasporic identity, and the enduring sacred work of remembering. Barnett brings the textured power of her work, Crafted Kinship, her artful reckoning with ancestral memory, and the Black material traditions that survive displacement alongside Browne's haunting imagery and lyrical essays. Together, they examine the cultural legacies carried through craft, ritual, and word. Guided by Alleyne's lyrical insight, this conversation traverses longing, belonging, beauty, and the psychic dislocations of migration and colonial inheritance. This event is a conjuring, an altar built of image, language, and form for those who wrestle with the weight of remembrance and the ache of becoming. As witnesses, you are all invited to lean into the balm that this event is meant to provide. Would you help me welcome to the stage our three authors and artists to the BCLF stage? Yeah. Which one are you going to start with? Okay. They didn't get the. Okay. So we're going to start the discussion with Malene's images. Present the images first.
Did you send them?
Mm-hmm.
And let's make sure it's right.
Thank you. Can we give this woman a round of applause? Thank you. Thank you so much to BCLF. Thank you to audience for being here. I'm so excited to be in conversation with these amazing folks, and we're hoping the tech cooperates, but like I told them, I don't know if you have already, but I have seen the books they produce, so we really can't be bad today, no matter what the text wants to do. So yeah, let's wave the beautiful products around. And again, like I said in the panel yesterday, I want to thank whoever is doing the amazing briefs for these events. I think they're so evocative and thoughtful, right? And they really kind of prepare the thought space, prepare the intellectual space for us to begin our conversations. And they put me to ask questions, and if for nothing else, I have questions. We will leave room for you to have questions, but believe me, if you are shy, I am not. So we will keep going. But you know, we're thinking today about art, Caribbean art, diasporic Caribbean art, about praxis, about theory, about how they meet. And of course, we have this really wonderful title, it's Altar of Memory, in which we're thinking about, for me, altar summons up the idea of offering. It summons up the idea of spirituality, mystery, right? And then memory, right? Which brings us to all of the ways that we engage memory, are disengaged from memory, that we use memory as material, that we theorize memory, all of which they're doing in amazing ways. And so I'm going to ask Malene to start us off with kinship.
Sure. Well, first, thank you everyone for coming here. It's Sunday, it's the afternoon, and you could be anywhere.
Oh.
Yes, it's not on. Mic check. Hello.
Microphone check. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Can you hear me better?
No.
You want mine?
No. Well, I want to make sure. Hold on. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah. This isn't cutting into our time, right? Let's try to make sure.
The pack? The tech is not trying to let us be great, but we will be great.
You hear me now? All right.
Awesome.
Okay, so you can hear me now? Yes. All right, perfect, thank you. So I'm saying thank you everyone for coming. It's Sunday afternoon, you could be anywhere and you chose to be here, so that's like very special.
We're already in the company of smart people, right?
Well, I'll be honest, there probably won't be any images about the book, so you're just gonna have to listen to me, and then I'm gonna give you a visual of what the book is about. I'm actually gonna read the intro, so you could get a sense of the why for this book called Crafted Kinship. Crafted Kinship, if you're not aware, it's a book that goes inside the creative practices of contemporary Black Caribbean makers. And it was a book that I wanted to find when I was in grad school studying ceramics. I was doing my MFA at Tyler School of Art and Architecture, and I'll share more as I read, okay? So, art has, oh, and by the way, I have a lot of papers here, but don't worry, it's just that I can't see, and so I have big point, font size, and so it just looks like a lot, but don't worry, it's gonna go by quick. Art has always been a part of my life, defining who I am and the impact I want to make on the world. I'm a child of Caribbean immigrants from a lineage of makers. My maternal grandmother was a gifted fashion designer, and my mother turned jute yarn into intricate macrame wall hangings. Witnessing the care and artistry they put into their work set the stage for my appreciation of craftsmanship, and it sparked my interest in archives that preserve, or in some cases fail to preserve, the histories of our Caribbean creative practices. So after working as a textile and rug designer for 2 decades, I decided in 2020 to pursue an MFA in ceramics at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University, which is where I spent 2 years unraveling my romantic relationship with my Caribbean origins. My investigation began with researching my own Caribbean heritage, asking, how does having a mother from St. Vincent and the Grenadines and a father from Jamaica, the first and last Caribbean islands to be colonized, inform my sense of identity and my multidisciplinary creative practice? How does my identity as a member of the diaspora inform my work? And how does it intersect with the work of Caribbean makers who were raised on the islands, including those who have remained in or returned to their Caribbean lands? So these queries served as a guide on my journey of self and cultural identity, and in my search for Caribbean makers asking similar questions who were also on a mission to deconstruct the region's colonial past by creating art objects and space for Black diasporans. So I was born in the Bronx, New York, and I grew up in a small town in Newark, Connecticut, and I currently live in Brooklyn, New York. And so my research necessitated the reverse journey as that taken by my parents back to Jamaica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and across the Caribbean islands. So learning about each new maker, I saw common threads emerge in the materials, processes, and themes across our collective studio practices. Yet each maker had a different approach to creating new futures for the region, for reimagining colonial narratives through an Afrofuturistic lens, to repurposing everyday objects and materials, to implementing ancestral processes such as manjack weaving, coil building in clay, and painting with sugar to expand Black diasporic experiences. So from my research, I started to imagine what would it be like to converse with these Caribbean makers and document what they had to say and how they worked. And since my studio practice centers on Pan-Africanism, by connecting the community and reimagining Black archives, I wanted to gather a group of like-minded Caribbean makers to create the book I wish I had in graduate school and contribute to the historical record for future generations. So hence, Crafted Kinship was born, a book by and about our rich Black Caribbean heritage. So there are more than 60 voices from across the Caribbean explore how their practices of making through their hands, we have each formed a kinship with the land where our ancestors began a life of forced servitude. Of course, this book is also about hearing each maker reflect on the specific provocations that inspire their practices, what I'm calling the threads of kinship. These threads are the strands of DNA that run through their work, establishing their particular salience as artists, Caribbean artists and Black Caribbean artists. So the core of this book is to understand that the Caribbean is a small place that significantly impacts the world. It doesn't matter where we are, we return to our Caribbean homes as a source of our work, identities, and spiritual belonging. So keeping this in mind, I was interested in each maker's process rather than their outcomes. I searched the Caribbean and its diaspora, bringing together a group of contemporary Black Caribbean makers to reflect on prominent themes in their work: African origins, ancestors, Black womanhood or manhood, colonial histories, community and collaboration, identity, joy, land, climate, sustainability, materiality, memory, migration, diaspora, and spirituality. So Crafted Kinship is intended to serve as an archival record comprising interviews and photographs. The featured makers are multidisciplined, multi-generational, and gender inclusive. The interviews provide insight into each person's exploration of their crafted kinship to the land, people, and culture around their Caribbean identity, and how it informs their studio practice. So for some of the makers profiled in the book, their connection to the land is to a specific island home. For while others, it is to the broader region. Some are relatively new, while others are deeper in their practices. Several makers employ the tools of art, design, and craft to explicitly explore their relationships to island homes, while for others, the themes are more subtle or innate. Navigating a kinship to the Caribbean is multifaceted and complicated. Whether you were born inside or outside the region, I want you, the reader, to gain insight into how each maker examines and reconstitutes our fragmented history through their craft. So like my studio practice, this book has been a collaborative process. I see power in making space for many of us to share the spotlight, and I invite you to share this light with them. Immerse yourself in the space held for and by these makers around our shared stories and practices. And I hope this window into these makers' lives is a source of inspiration for you. Whether you're a budding seasoned maker from the Caribbean, an advocate for the Caribbean makers, a curator, a collector, or simply someone curious about knowledge around the region, I want you to, when you get the book, because I do want you to get the book, to turn those pages, absorb the words and the visuals, and figure out what crafted kinship means to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So I told him I wanted this to be a little bit call and response, and so I wanted to really just sit with what we heard a little bit, and I want to launch a question because you have over 60 people in it. It is not a slim volume. It is robust. Yes. It is gorgeous. Can you show them some? I mean, it's beautiful, and yet, I know you can't have everybody in there, so I'm so interested in your selection process. Like, you know, what was the process of the search like for these makers?
Well, you know, it's interesting because, of course, all the Jamaicans out there, this book could have been about Jamaica, okay? Because there are so many artists coming out of the country, okay? But what happened was I was really, because I worked with an editor very closely, and what happened was when I was in grad school and I started to look at the different makers, again, who are investigating the region with a similar lens, I saw themes. And so those themes helped to inform who should be in the book or not. So if their work was talking about one of the themes, then we approached them. Of course, we didn't get all yeses, but we got many. But that was how I was able to edit.
That's for volume 2.
That's right, volume 2.
For real.
Because we know this is not the definitive. Right. It really is the beginning of a conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think there's enough in there that really, because it's multidisciplinary, it's not just painters, it's not just sculptors. It goes from art, design, crafts.
Martinique and furniture makers?
Furniture makers, architects, textile people, photographers, videographers. There's something for everyone.
It's so rich. It's so rich.
And there's space, and there's 2 ancestors in there too, because I left space, and the book is arranged, just so you know, it's arranged by alphabetical order by first name, intentionally, because that is our chosen names. I didn't want to give any more, highlight our colonizers' last names, which are not our own. And so if you know somebody you think is in the book, look for them by their first name. And the first names are actually, there's even around the design of the book, which was very important. The names are actually highlighted in very bold letters, intentionally the first names are. So when you look at a profile, I'm just trying to find a profile where you could really see how, I know you may not be able to see, but the first name is in a bigger font than the last name. And it's emphasized that way intentionally. And then the country, the Caribbean country that they represent is on one side, and where they were when we recorded their stories, or where they are right now. Absolutely. So you'll see 2 locations.
Now, one of the people we will find in this book is the editor.
Yes, I am in the book.
And so I would love you to talk about what it meant to, I think sometimes we struggle with that, right? And so what it meant to include yourself in that conversation. And if you found that there was a tension or what was possibly positive or challenging tensions between being, having to take that method. I'm thinking of Kevin writing that, you have to be outside of yourself to see yourself. And so I'm curious about what that interaction was.
Well, because my work is really about reimagining Black archives, my work is part of the archive. So there was no question of whether I should or shouldn't be in the book. Yes, I created it. It was my vision. But my work is in conversation with all of this work and all of the makers in it. So it just made sense for me to be a part of that conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I mentioned, Kevin, do you want to jump in with any questions or comments? Because if not.
No, I do. I wanted to, of course, more publicly just congratulate Malene on this amazing text, right? I feel like, as a rhetorician, which is one of the angles from which I come, to look at this as a deliberate and very deliberative crafting of kinship, right? Yes. So you are, in terms of navigating the archive and reformulating what the archive can do, right? And then also simultaneously creating this new archive, not an anthology, right?
Yes.
So it's not definitive, right? But it has the capacity to be definitional, right? Which is what a lot of our archives can actually accomplish. So I found myself reading in awe of that particular sort of attempt, right? The attempt and the accomplishment, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to acknowledge that, first of all, and to look forward really to mining all or most or some or even just a bit of what is said, what is shared, right? Because in spite of the multiple platforms and materials and approaches that people use, this thread, looking for the thread becomes this really interesting exploratory project, right? That if one really allows oneself to become immersed in that, right? One sees oneself experiencing art, right? As opposed to having this kind of esoteric conversation about it.
Yes, yes, yeah. And to your point, well, first, thank you for that. Thank you for
You're
that.
very welcome. Yeah.
But to your point, I intentionally made like even the portraits very big and bold, right?
Yeah.
It's not your typical.
This is a beautiful book.
Portrait.
I mean, you put it on your coffee
it's not like a profile.
It's not a profile. Yes. I intentionally, and each profile is different intentionally because I wanted to show the multiplicities of our creative practice. One portrait doesn't fit all.
Right.
And you would know that. So it was intentional around that. And also too, just to give some backstory, I went to grad school in 2020, COVID time. Yeah. And I intentionally didn't take any like studio classes, so I took it's called a class called Colonial Visual Systems, and it was talking about the creation of the Caribbean, right? So before Columbus and when he came, all of it. So then I'm the only MFA student in a class full of PhD art historians, okay? And so my classmates were talking, and I was like, what are they saying? I did not, and then the readings, I had to go to my professor, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna pass this class. So she said to me, she said, oh, Malene, don't worry, that reading was like gonna be the most dense. So once we get through it, we're good, right? And so it was Sylvia Winter, by the way. So
by the way,
BT dubs.
And she told me, oh, I have challenges with it. So I said, okay. But I say all that to say that because when we were in class and we were, you know, critiquing and interrogating art, you know, they had a different language than me. And so it came to my attention that I said, art historians, they're crafting language around artists' work in a way that is very different than actual makers are doing it themselves. So the book is really having the makers themselves tell their story, you know, so it's coming from their perspective, and I wanted to make the book accessible. So whether you were an art historian or not, that you would be able to feel that you could approach and understand what everyone was talking about.
It was a you and the text, not you Google and the text experience.
That's right.
Exactly. Well, and again, we have, again, absolutely congratulations on the book. And I wanted to think too about, you know, we started to, the themes are coming up, archive, right, praxis in there. And so I want to be sure that we let's get Kevin's work out. And then I would want to jump into those larger questions.
For sure.
And so I'd love to move to our sense of arrival. So tell us a little bit about the book, maybe.
Well, this book is an offering. It's an offering of love. And as a result of what it is fundamentally, it has forced me to be extremely vulnerable, right? So I began this book over the past few years. It started pre-COVID. So late 2018, 2019, right, started. And I wanted to do something on the heels of High Mass because I had a lot of nervous creative energy that I didn't know what to do with. And I said, well, oh gosh, boy, what is I gonna do? What is I gonna do? I said, all right, you know what? I feel I'm gonna start a new book, yes, boy. And, you know, right? Because the last one was so easy to do, eh? You know? I was like, yeah, man, I'm gonna start a new book, right? So see me scribbling down, well, what is I trying to do here, boy? What is I trying to do here? And the notion of arrival came really in conversation, as most great projects really do, which is to say that this book is, for me, it's a great project, great in terms of its capacity, great in terms of its effect and its impact on me, and great in terms of its ambition, what it attempts to do. Yeah, but you reach by Kevin, but you get through with High Mass now. I say, have I really arrived? What is that? And I just talking, you know, and it ended up sort of evolving into this complication of what is it that it means to me or to any one of us to arrive, right? And I didn't think that I had arrived. I still don't, right? I feel like I'm in this process of arriving. So really what I'm engaging with is not arrival, but literally the sense of it, you see? Whether that sense is anticipation or terror or, you know, excitement or concern or doubt or whatever it is, right? The sense is where I reside, right? And because I wanted to operate within that sense and ask myself, well, what does it mean to operate within that sense? I thought, well, let me create a project that made space in which I could operate, right? But I couldn't make that space for myself alone. Not because I was feeling particularly generous, like, yeah, let me all just free for all, let me give on any space now, but more so like I operate and have operated throughout the entirety of my career in a kind of virtual isolation. I feel like, I don't feel like I'm one of the few Caribbean rhetoricians, right? I don't know how many people walk around saying, yeah, boy, you know, Caribbean rhetoric is a thing that we really need to pay attention to. wait, Caribbean rhetoric. Yeah, you read that Caribbean rhetoric. No, Caribbean rhetoric. It's more like, it's my experience for the past, let's say, almost 20 years has been, so I do Caribbean rhetoric. And you're like, well, where's that? You know, where's rhetoric again? And I'm like, well, you know, something more than what the politicians do. So what I will do is, before I go too far afield, I want to, in the spirit of offering, I want to read a section here that really is about you, right? I make the case very early that this book is yours, right? Buy it, certainly. But if you get it on open access, or if you, God forbid, download it, you know, illicitly, it's still for you, right? I mean, I don't want you to download it illicitly. Buy the book, right? It's a beautiful book, if I do say so myself, right? But buy the book.
No lies
right?
detected.
No lies detected.
Yes.
Right? So when I said that this book is for you, I mean it. In a sense of arrival, you will encounter things standing in for other things. Words for images, images for objects, objects for images, images for words, words for other words, and so on. They will appear as for other things. I have set them this way. I know you will supplant my intentions with your own whenever you arrive. You are not here yet, of course. I have to imagine you as I write. I do not know what you will look like, only that you will appear. I do not know if you will appear, but I must write as if you will. Know then that as you read this, you are a moment materializing, finally. You are a dream I have dreamed. I am writing, have written, in anticipation of you. You are not here yet, but I have written a sense of you into the very tensing of the book. I have implicated you in its grammar. What do I mean? Well, to begin with, the telling of this story occurs in absentia. In our absence, yours and mine. We will take turns, in fact, being absent and present in what's to come. Today for you, tomorrow for me. You are not here yet, but you is. You, the audience that reach before the audience reach. The essence of an audience. Imagined but also remembered. Understood here in the way someone is addressed at Juve. Someone who is a stranger, that is, at times, yourself. When we out on the street, out in the road that make to walk, and the sun now starting to come up. Maybe you're on Carib Street, or Coffee Street when it catch you. Maybe you sprawl out in the clouds of Paramin. Maybe you sprawl out in front of Millfleur or the cathedral. Maybe you swirl in between the police and them at South Key. Maybe you stop and stand up and lean up. Maybe you stoop down or you skin up. Maybe you're chipping. Maybe you're dragging yourself half dead to the savannah stage. Maybe you're in the morning sun and it beating you like a rhythm. Maybe you're catching your breath. Maybe something waiting to catch you. Maybe it catch you. Maybe you get away. You're black. Black, but you're green and you're blue. You're white and yellow and red and brown. You're paint up, but you're ugly, and you're pretty. You're wet down, but you don't afraid later or the cold that sure to come. You're powder up, but you leave all your softness home. You're oil up, but you're rough. Your body grinding on somebody's body, on somebody's wall, on the road that you know is yours. You're mud up, you stink, you're dirty, you're dirty. You're tight because you drink. You're loose because you drink. You're high because you smoke. You're high because you don't smoke. You're not too long past La Perouse. You're not too long dance in the crossroads. You're not too long drop money and make some wrongs around the manhole. You start to come apart. Your form, or what was your form, dissipating like smoke. Like water on the uneven asphalt. Like rum in the blood. Your mask about to come off and you hear somebody say lover, friend, enemy, partner, stranger, say, hey mask, I know your face. You respond, hey mask, I know your face. Year after year, the you here who calls and responds. So we go and call when I say hey mask, and you say, I know your face. All you ready? All right. Hey mask,
I know your face.
Aye, aye, aye. Listen, I love the people too bad, you know. Well, they almost make me cuss, do we? The you here who calls and responds between being masked and unmasked, known and unknown, then and there and here and now, whose face I say, I know, but have not yet seen and may never see, is whom I mean to address. I will not always know who he is, and he will not always know who I is. Even in the plain view of the page, some errant reference to you will lay there, overlooked like a vagrant bookmark in the gutter of the page, until a gaze is cast in its direction.
So when I was in grad school, I had a professor who said, you have to pay attention to how a text operates in your body. And I fling this book around so much. What? Come back in. And so I want to even begin there, which is not what I have on my iPad. But I want to talk about how this text is theory, right? It is high Caribbean rhetoric. And it is mass on the street.
Yeah.
It's Juve morning. And what is so wonderful about it is the seamlessness between those two spaces that everything tells us should be disparate. And I want to know how you walk that road in this text.
The deliberate choice to say I am all of those things at once. I'm neither Bacchanalist alone, right? My mother say, boy, hey, if you was a woman, you would have a real jammet, you know. I say, putting aside her gendering of the jammet, I was like, well, that is probably the sweetest thing my mother could ever say to me as a grown man, right? Because the idea is that I grew up on Carib Street in San Fernando. Carib Street is a ghettoized place. It is, in some ways, reminiscent of Lavantil, even, but much smaller, right? San Fernando Hill is one of the promontories of the city of San Fernando, right? But down at the bottom of San Fernando Hill, on Carib Street, is Presentation College, which is where I went to school. You see, so I was never sort of one thing or the other. I was all of those things at one time. And I knew that I didn't have the language for it then, but I knew I was experiencing conflict, existential conflict, etc. As I developed in my practice as a scholar, as a thinker, as a Bacchanalian, I decided that I wanted to go find the language, So when people would talk to me just in basic conversation, they'd find that I would be tentative in how I speak. And that's because I'm always searching for the most precise way, not necessarily perfect, but the most precise way to say what it is I'm trying to say. Because I want to know that I am the one trying to say it, as opposed to trying to parrot
Not
or trying
received.
to precisely, right? Trying to say things in a particular way. Besides, I wanted this book to be an embodiment of Caribbeanness, right? And if I wanted it to be the embodiment of Caribbeanness, it had to be the embodiment of my Caribbeanness in practice, So as theorist, as commerce agent, as writer, as artist, as all of those different things, and trying to balance it became for me which is really the question, became for me like a pan arrangement, right? So when I visualize this book, it is a pan arrangement, right? I grew up between two pan yards, right? Hillside Symphony and Antillean All Stars. A stone's throw away was Fontclair, right? Skiffle Bunch not too far, Hatters down by the wharf, right? Panel that's down behind Red Step. So you're hearing pan, and you're hearing how pan itself is arranged, right? And you know, sometimes if you want to insult somebody, you say, oh God, you're looking like an over-arranged pan tune, right? Because there's all these different elements that come together, right? And some of them are in conflict with each other, and others are really seamless. Some of the best arrangements that you hear is in a pan arrangement. So for me, that's what I was thinking.
Wonderful analogy, yeah. I wanted to talk about modality because you could flip through for them a little bit today. Well, actually, you don't have to flip through because you have some of the images behind us. This is a book that engages multiple systems of meaning, right? And so we have the photography, we have poems, right? That attention to every word. I'm like, oh, that rings a bell, right? As a poet, and I think there's I'm curious about. Hold on, let me read what I write on there. Hold on. I want to talk to you about modalities, right? There's so many at work in the text and in your practice. And so I want to know, both in a personal sense, and I think you started to tell, but what about the Caribbean story must be told in more than one symbolic register? Because I don't think you just thought, well, let me throw in a picture, right? Like that sense of curation, that sense of precision, it's very intentionally felt to me as a reader. And so, again, that question, like, why is our story, why does it demand of us multiple ways of speaking?
Well,
or of you, rather, because
I think this is one of the things that for me, makes Malene's book so important, so key, right, as a resource and really as a source for a lot of thinking and feeling in terms of the multiple modalities that are available to us. Reading it through the lens of my own sort of isolation and really relief at seeing people gathered, seeing this community gathered between these pages, gave me a sense of, all right, you know what? I'm kind of on the right track here, right? I think what I'm doing is not just a response to impulse, a response to reflect, but part of a really interesting tradition, right? Or continuation of artistic tradition. On a more personal level, I feel like I walk with a lot of insecurities regarding what I do and how I do it, right? So it's not even a question of how well, but rather how or if I should. And because I wanted to tell a Caribbean story in a Caribbean way, it demanded these multiple genres. I for myself, didn't feel like one genre could effectively, not capture, right? And I want to be really clear about this, could effectively help liberate, aid in the liberation of Caribbeanness, Caribbean stories, right? So to the extent that a word cannot do what the image can do, right? A splinter in your finger that will stay for a week and a half, right? And have you wondering if it's gonna go into a blood vessel, or if it's going to get infected, or if it has anything to do with the pain in your back that you've been feeling, right? And the one in your knees, all they say, yeah, boy, it's because I was kneeling down sanding this piece of thing for the last 2 hours, right? That kind of expansiveness, right, is something that I could not effectively produce in written language, right? So I decided that these were the things that I would have to do, right? And while I'm not a trained artist, I will say that I'm an artist trained in the art of rhetoric, right? So rhetoric is my art, and all the materials, including the word, including the material, including paper, including whatever, right? All of these different things become the media that help me craft and mold and shape and trouble and be troubled by and be endangered by toward a movement of story, toward an understanding of story.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I want to reach out to both of you on that word that you just said, materials. So first of all, you talk insecurity. Nothing makes a person more insecure than going to an artist residency as a poet. And they have one poet and then 4 visual artists, printmakers, and they do studio visits, right? And so I'm like, yeah, I have worked on this sentence. I changed my commas on Monday, and I substituted the word crimson for scarlet. Thank you. And they're like, I have done this. And my hands are dirty and I have overalls. I mean, I wear the overalls too, but I just stay cute in them. And so true. And so the idea of materiality is one that I'm so intrigued by, because God help me, if I could, I would do something else. But I just, the ones, the material is what is a word for me. But I love that in the work that you do, that material is so generous, right? It's so wide. And then Malene, in the book, right? Just in some ways, these artists become the material of the text, right? And their story become the material of the text, and it creates this literal body of work that is so beautiful. But then each of them talks about right their relationship to the materials, and as part of Caribbeanness, as part of identity, as part of praxis, which of course is artistic. But again, for me, it's such a different relationship. So I'd love you all to talk a little bit about that relationship to materiality.
I'm like, who you?
Don't watch me. Go ahead. Go ahead. I want to hear.
No, this is interesting. It's like, well, it's again, Laura, which part of materiality? I mean, because there's so much.
I mean, it's your question.
I know, there's so much, but I think
maybe starting as an artist and then as the editor.
Yeah, because I think for me, because primarily right now I'm working in clay, right? And so clay is an archival material, right? So it lasts for centuries. I look at a lot of the archaeologists' papers where they found shards on different estates, and that was able to inform the type of lifestyle that was happening. It also informed who was here, right? So for example, I did a Fulbright in Jamaica around African Jamaican ceramic traditions, right? And so because there's not a lot of archival information out there in book form, I had to rely on archaeologists. And so I wanted to know, like, who were the first potters on the island? And I'm talking after they got rid of the Tainos, So, I'm talking about the black people who were the first that came. And so Port Royal had 2 earthquakes that pretty much destroyed the city, and it was the capital of Jamaica at one period, right? But Port Royal was known for their making. They were known for having artisans on that island. It was us who were making the work, and some of these papers have said that it was the Akans who were there first. So that brought me back to Ghana and looking at Ghanaian pottery. And the shards they found, the material, right, was able to connect to like traditional Akan, Ghanaian pots, right? So I say all that to say is that while I'm doing my research, when I find these bits of material, history related to the material, then it gets me to start to look and think about the material in a different way. Clay, this is something that we interact with on a daily basis, right? Even though we're thinking, yes, we may have ceramic pots and dishes, we may be eating from it, the earth that we walk on, and we're not thinking of it as a tool with meaning and purpose and liberation. And I say that because when I started to go even deeper around pottery and thinking about, okay, so after, Port Royal, the earthquake, they moved to Kingston, became the capital. So how did pottery change? How did that material change? So I wanted to know some of the iconic pots in Jamaica, and it was a yaba pot. Yabas are not just, known for Jamaica, they're out throughout the region, but it was yaba pots. But then I said, well, who were making the yaba pots, right? And it was the women. What was the yaba pot used for? Cooking food, holding food, it's stored food. So then how were these pots being made? In collectives. Women would dig the clay, hand build them. It was an item that the planters allowed us to make, right? And so then I started to think about, So it was a moment, even under bondage, we had a moment to be makers.
Right.
Right? We had a moment to go have and be creative on our own terms, in a sense. And we were also allowed to sell those pots in the market. So I was thinking about Sunday markets, right? Straw mats were approved and pottery was approved. Two materials, right? So imagine, what if those women bought their freedom by making and selling those pots, right? Now this material brings on a new meaning to it. And so because of all that, now I look at the work that I do working in clay as a tool for liberation. It liberates me physically while I'm working. When I share the information with my community, they feel liberated, they feel empowered. And so that's one way of looking at materiality.
Thank you. I'm now, the sentence is like, clay is an archival material. I think that's stuck,
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
I think, no, I wish I worked with clay.
Come on over anytime.
Yeah, coming up. But the idea of materiality is its connection to memory, right? Clay has memory.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't just help us remember, it doesn't just commemorate, right? But what it holds material memory, right? Elemental memory, right? Geologic memory. And in a way, for me, my journey through and with materiality began with a pencil point in my forehead, right? That like when I was 4 years old, excuse me, it's actually in the book. Could I read it a little bit?
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
I think we get that mic for joke already.
Right. Sorry, yeah. When I was 4 years old, a child stabbed me in the forehead with a pencil. The point, broken off, remained in my head until, drunk and high at 26, I squeezed it out. Over the years, a mass developed, a consequence of that piece of graphite I had carried around in me like an idea. The point was gone, but its ghost remained. Its remains have remained. Resting now above my eye, it casts its own shadow, in person, in pictures, on screens. So when I think about this piece of material that was embedded in my head for some decades, right? That idea of material and memory and what counts as archive it's visceral. It causes a visceral reaction for me because I had an archive, my very first archive, which is what I describe it as, in my head. I've been carrying it around with me. It actually, it is older, or it was at that point older than most of my body at that time, because the body that regenerates, or over time. So I'm looking at materiality, but I'm also looking at materiality in these very small and kind of like almost discarded ways, right? So scraps of metal would find their way into my work. Disembodied machines would find their way. Pieces of thrown away wood would find their way into the work. And then I would end up embedding pieces of my own practice, thoughts, love letters, notes, ideas, different materials into the work itself, because I'm sort of like thinking of how do I meditate and create through that sense of materiality and memory, and so that's how I engage it, right? Whatever those materials are.
And so the word archive came up, and I'm interested in that too, because I think the idea of the archive is it's having its moment in all the circles, right? Sure. But I'm intrigued by, and if we start to talk about this, like what when you think of a Caribbean archive, right? I feel like we're one of people that of such temporariness, right? How can we archive mass, right? In the happening, and yeah, I know we archive in story, we archive in all these different ways. So I'm curious about your just kind of definitions of and archives that you've worked with that you find access, to how you access archive. Sorry, my brain is going off. I'm like, if we think of a spiritual archive, how do you access a spiritual archive, right? So I'm curious about the ways in which you define archive and access archive and then work with it in your work.
You want me to go first? Or?
I could go first if you
Go ahead.
I think of an archive as a locus of memory, right? I don't limit the materiality of the archive to, let's say, paper.
Right.
Because if we think about the limitations of the written archive for people who were not allowed to keep written archives or were prevented and were sort of like punished for keeping the written archive, you think, well, did they have memory at all? So the answer obviously is yes, right? So where do you go to find that memory? You go to the pottery that was made, right? So in that pottery is practice, in that pottery is process, in that pottery is logic and ephemerality, certainly, but ethereality, because there's a thinking of what this has to do over time. So there's this thinking about time, there's a theorization about time, there's a fantasization about what this object can hold and what it might hold and what it might never hold, right? So you're theorizing in the making, right? And you never write down no schematic for the rug you make, right? Or for the bowl that you turn, right? But the memory is there, right? How do you access spiritual memory? Well, you pray. Or you chant, or you dance, right? My pause reason now because I study in my mother, right? That connection to where you come from, your ground and your groundation, right? That is where the spirit is. And I say these things because I'm thinking about aspects of Caribbeanness that no empire could hold, that no power could grasp, that no container could, contain. You see? So trying to do something or doing something that you know will not only outlive you. So you're doing work, you're creating something that you know is going to outlive you, right? That's not particularly deep, it's not supernatural. I mean, we're finite beings, and if we want something to last, we kind of know that it's going to last beyond us, right? Beyond that is what? There's this expansiveness of what memory could become and how it could shift and morph and become some other thing, right? I was telling my students the other day that thinking is its own form of improvisation, right? That the reception or the witness of things becomes its own form of improvisation because your participation in it changes it, right? Our participation in the archive, looking at these archives as if they're these, these fixed things, right? These static things, I feel is a bit wrong-headed, particularly for us, right? Because we are a moving people.
Absolutely.
We seek to move and to move people and be moved by, right? Which is to say, the things that we produce, the things that we create, had to move too, right? It had to move, right? Or we end up getting caught up with, you understand? You end up getting catch with the old Zeppo. You know what? The archive is this weathered document that you had to spend out all your research money that you don't have to fly to some library that don't even want you there, right? And watching you like you're going to
Can you wear these gloves, please?
Right? Wear these gloves. You understand? Don't come in here, just So that kind of illicit engagement with the archive is uninteresting to me. I have a 18th century head of a bee, right? It's somewhere in my house. 18th century, 1768 or something like that. I love it. I've written about it. I can't even find it now. Right? I say, where that thing is, boy? And I shame, I shame because if all you ask me now, I go say the same thing now that I say about 5 years ago when I first wrote about it. You understand? And that level of irreverence is deliberate, right? All protocols for historians observed, right? I'm not an historian. I have an irreverence for the fixed, or the fixedness, or the fixity of archives, right? Because the fixity of archives have held blackness in a way that is not satisfactory to me, right? So, right? So what I try to do then, right? So I telling only was rhetoric, right? And right. So that's what rhetoric is, right? The idea of trying to see if I could implicate, not persuade, and not chain up, right? I want to implicate Alleyne in this idea of irreverence for the archive, because then you start making things that are beyond the archive, right? Are you remembering differently? I don't know, maybe go ahead and see what happened, right? Because in that see what happened is a possibility, right, that I cannot even account for, right? And if I cannot account for it, who can account for it, right? If you can account for it properly, who will account for it, right? If the self cannot contain the self, what can contain it, right? So,
Yeah.
For more, read the book.
Well, I'll add that I think we're all archivists
Sure.
in our own way, and I think many of us we looked to the archive as something that's outside of us, outside of our capabilities, and I think it's really, especially in this stage of where we are politically, the landscape, is that we really have to take ownership of what our archive can look like and should look like, to the point that I'll use examples, you know, that lace doily that your granny had on her chair, that's part of the archive.
No doubt.
You know, the bowl, of course, the clay pot, you know, that was holding those spices, that's part of the archive.
Absolutely.
The shoe that, you know, granddad was wearing is part of the archive. But the key about archive, it starts with us caring.
Yes.
Being an archivist is about care.
Yes.
Right? And so we have to think about the spaces that we want to build for ourselves now and for the future generations. When we're looking to even buy a home, how many of us are saying, does it have a library? Does it have a space for the archive? We want the kitchen, we want the bedrooms, we want the bathrooms, but we need to think about, where's the archive being held?
Absolutely.
Where is it being preserved? And we can't wait for others to do it for us. Because the reality is, most of the archival spaces we do not own. We do not manage. They are not being funded by us.
Correct.
And so as we could see that they could be taken away
At any time.
at any time. So that's why it's our responsibility in our homes. We need to go back to those times when we were taking care of educating ourselves on our own terms. So the archive should be, Lauren, I want to come to your house and see your archive.
I was just thinking, Mommy and Deborah, I know y'all watching on YouTube. I keep stuff because I'm an archivist.
You're the archivist.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
You're an archivist. Could I also add?
Yes.
Could I also add that? Not only are you all archivists, right, by virtue of being who you are and having things that you wish to keep, but the body is also an archive, right? You know, the body it holds memory, right? In the very same way that clay does and wood does, right? We are, in fact, elemental, right? So to sort of like follow on Malene's idea of care, right? I mean, I don't say tongue-in-cheek that I have an irreverence for the archive in that particular way. I mean that, but I do not mean I don't care, right? So the notion of my irreverence is try to imagine an irreverence that is grounded in care, because it's care for what and care for who. It's care for me and all you, right? It's not necessarily care for the institutions who have been constructed and see their sort of lives, their identities, as gatekeeping the information about us from us, right? And in the event that we are prevented from having access to ourselves, what degree, or to what degree, do we craft new ways of thinking, new ways of remembering, new ways of keeping and holding and caring, right? That is beyond the reach of institution, right?
And I want to link here too, because archive, we think so much of the past, right? And holding tradition and holding, but you're also, both of you are reaching forward,
Certainly.
right? That the beyond of the archive. And that kind of leads me to the idea of, okay, it's like a compound idea of mystery, obscurity, unknowingness, right? That I think is so much a part of what, as artists, we tend to inhabit. Like when you started off talking, Kevin, the sense, oh yeah, we get the hook. No, the sense of arrival, right? And so that we're always working as folks working in the arts from a beyondness that we're imagining into, right? That we're writing into, that we're molding into, right? That we're capturing or escaping capture. So I'm just kind of thinking about, or if you want to just throw something out there about that link between the archive, that anchor of the archive, and the future and futurity and what's ahead and possibility.
Certainly. You want to start?
I'm thinking. I'm thinking. I mean, I think about archive as living. It's a living entity. And I think it's about us changing the language of what we've been conditioned to think of archive. So the future is, again, really taking ownership over those spaces and with intention.
Yes.
You know, I think, you know, you talk about in your book about, you know, how you have all these modalities of ways of being, ways of writing, you know, imagery. You know, we need to see all of that in the archive, right? And I think we're in a position now where we could be unapologetic about having all of these access to the way that we speak, the way that we move, the music that we listen to, the way we're writing, you know, the way we look in image, all of these things we now have agency over it, right? So what does that mean for the future? That means that 20, 30, 40, I'm trying to get to at least 50 years from now, I want to be able to look back and say, there's not a single fragment in the archive. That's like what I think about the future. Because when I look back now, 50, there's a lot of empty space that we're trying to fill in. So forward, those gaps are going to be so small, and that they're non-existent because we all took the time and care to fill in to the archive.
I like that. For me, right now, in addition to what Malene has just said, like I'm thinking really about this. This is one of the ink blots that appears in the book, and I'm thinking about its creation, right? My grandfather had died in 2018, April of 2018, and I was navigating, I suppose, genres of grief, right? It didn't feel like sorrow, right? It felt like different forms of grief that were asking me to think and feel certain things, that were acting upon my body, my psyche, etc. And I wanted to write about it, but I didn't feel like I had the words, right? Which is something that we all sort of are afflicted by. But then I sort of shifted and decided that rather than subscribe to the written word, right? That what I would do is use the materials that are my stock in trade, right? Pen and paper, right? But I wouldn't write anything. So to use pen and paper in the absence of words, right, led to the development of these blots. Now, they're described as Rorschach blots, but I wasn't thinking about no Rorschach, right? I wasn't, right? I wasn't. All respect to, I guess, psychology or whatever. But I was like, listen, I feel like I want to make these blots because these blots and my reflection on them, I wanted to do certain things, right? not sure what I wanted to do, just certain things in this really abstract way. But then I decided, as part of the production of that, to use my breath, right? So, you know, so there's splatters from my breath, right, that end up on this, right? So all these splatters is me just kind of like blowing and blowing, you know, blowing ink, right? And that then becomes an archive, not necessarily of my breath, right, but an archive of the narrative, right, or a narrative of the attempt to archive the breath. You see what I mean, right? So it was placing me in this really kind of like abstract space, right? A space that I know that I couldn't hold with language, which meant that, or suggested at the very least, that I was operating in a place where I couldn't be held, right? Now, I wanted comfort, yeah? But not the comfort of being held, if you understand what I mean. Sometimes it's the comfort of awareness that you're seeking. Sometimes it's the tenderness of acknowledgement, yeah? Sometimes it's the sort of like, the touch, yeah? The touch of one's own body to one's body, right? The touch of one's hand to the skin, the touch of one's hand to the face, right? And in doing that, immersing myself, recognizing implicitly that I am archival, that I am performing an archival practice, that I am in fact producing something that I know, if I do it well, if I do it right, or if I just do it, had to outlive me, right? It means that I'm now consciously implicated in the creation of archives, right? In the archiving process, right? That however people may engage with it, right, becomes this kind of like knock-on effect of what archiving could be. So then archiving becomes a form of reading. Archiving becomes a form of response. Archiving becomes a form of meditation. Archiving becomes a form of rejection, right? This is absurd. What is this, an essay? Or what are you calling this, an essay for? You know, that kind of way, right? But the engagement with it, right, makes for this really organic movement of meaning, right? Not even my movement or my breath's movement. Is this movement of meaning that operates beyond the boundary, right, of materiality that we used to get there, right? Beyond the boundaries of the Caribbean and the border of America and whatever this America wants to be in this moment, right? Beyond all of that, right? And that's not to suggest that, oh, wherever America is now is something that I could ignore, you know, because I can't ignore it, right? I saying down here, and I saying, well, ICE could come for me anytime, anytime. I don't have to be documented, undocumented, official, unofficial. They could come for me anytime because I am marked.
Great.
Been marked. Which is why this new time don't feel so new to so many of us. It's like, all right, I see you. You was coming a long time ago. You've been doing this.
It's been archived in us.
You understand what I'm saying? Archived in. You're right. So we've been knowing, right, that this was the move. I heard I think it was Lauren earlier, right, who had said, you know, we knew this was coming. Right?
Coming to come.
You know, coming to come and it reach, right? And I mean, this is kind of like along the lines of like not even wanting to make a pun of arrival, right? Because for me, arrival doesn't operate at the level of puns, right? It doesn't operate at the register of, yeah, well, you know, I suppose it has arrived, and now I'll come and yeah, I guess you've arrived. I mean, it's cutesy, right? And then you could say it over drinks, but in reality, when I say that this book is yours, I asking you to define what arrival is for you and what and how and why even you arrive. You know what I mean? In a way that no one else has or should have access to, right? Which then becomes yours, which then becomes a form or the possibility of form for what freedom can look like.
And it becomes part of all of our arriving, right? Because it becomes part of the Lord's story.
Indeed,
It becomes
indeed.
part of the Lord's story.
Yeah.
And we would like you to now join us. As you know, this is your book. This is your text. We are happy to engage your questions.
Oh, I could say one thing. I could say something real quick. Can I borrow this? Here now. All right. the feel of this book. All right? All you, here, man. The feel of this book. All right? You're touching the book. And I remember I was scolded one time by Michael Thelwell. He was like, a book is not a talisman, you know. I was like, yeah, I know. And I was in grad school. I was like, yes, I know. Right? But to touch, to look at, before even reading. That's why I put that portrait on the book, right? So you could see it and engage with it before you even read it, right? Listen now. This is part of the crafting of kinship, the touching. And it reminds me of the totems, right? The totems that we touch to sanctify and are sanctified by, right? Yeah. You know, the Apollo, right? You go in the Apollo and you had to, if you don't touch that tree trunk, you're bound to lose, right? And even if you don't, when you're getting boo hard, you understand? You had to touch that. That is ritual, right? That is respect. Right? That's recognition of the archive that we carry, the archive of memory that we remind ourselves of. So touching this book, I buy this book and when it reach, I touch it, I say, oh God, boy, I really like this book. You understand? So by the time I open the book,
You don't like it already?
Yeah, the cover was warm. I say, all right, yeah, you understand? Anyway, I have my book backstage.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say it.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hello. We
Hi.
only have time for 2 questions. Good evening. We've run over time. We only have time for 2 questions. We'll let the lovely lady go here first. With the microphone, please.
Please, yeah.
I'm looking at the Rorschach, like.
You're going again with the Rorschach?
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's
Because I was looking at the camera of our sister here. When she's looking through the camera, I see figures, people, embrace Black people, and you were talking about comfort. So I was wondering if that's the image that came to your mind when you created this.
I would want to say yes, because that is an amazing and beautiful sentiment, because it connects to that notion of conjuring that this book really is about. The book is a conjuring, but I cannot say yes, because I wasn't thinking about anything or anyone in terms of like an intention, right? Beyond just think of it like free writing, right? Just getting the words on paper, right? Breathing it onto paper. I wasn't necessarily trying to breathe anything into form, right? If it took a form, then I'm thinking, all right, happenstance, or something subconscious, or something magical, something spiritual, but it definitely wasn't me saying, okay, I'm creating this. And I think had I tried to create something more than what I did there, it would have been a failure. And I think Caribbeanness is sort of like built on the shells and skeletons and sediment of multiple existential failures, right? But I feel like what works for these pieces is a step back from intention, you know? The idea that my intention, what I wanted to do, was unimportant in the creation of this thing. And I feel like that subordination of my intention meant that I could deal with possibly with like some raw conceit, right? You know, the idea that I was told by Elizabeth Nunes many years ago that writers write not from fullness but from the lack of it, right? You know, so the idea, or one of my interpretations of that idea, is that what you're seeing is the space in between. What you're seeing is the recognition of that lack of fullness, right? Not emptiness, right? But a lack of fullness. A desire for fullness, I don't know, maybe, sometimes, right? Maybe a desire to empty myself, right? But the idea to participate in something so much grander than myself necessitated a removal, maybe to the extent that I could, of myself as I had perceived it you know, and just to let certain things happen, right? Then I could maybe try to divine some kind of meaning from it afterward, you know, see what the transcription yields afterward, you know, subjected to the intellect, subjected to analysis afterward, you know. But I didn't need to look for anything in it. And there's another one in the book where it was pointed out to me that, you know, it's like my grandfather's eyes kind of like looking back at me, and it's striking because I did not see it. You know, somebody say, hey, did you see that? And I'm like, see what? And I'm like, because your feelings kind of stupid, right? It's like, you want to say yes, but you know you can't lie, right? Because somebody will pull your card. It's like, do you see that? And I'm like, see
Sure.
what? You know? And they're like, the eyes looking back at you, and I say, oh God, boy, no. And they point it out, and now I can't even unsee it. Right? And that's, remember I was telling earlier in terms of the participatory aspect of archiving and meaning making and all of that, had I not been in conversation at that moment with that person who could see something that I had made that I did not know I made, I would not know that I had made it, you see. Right? So now, meaning ends up getting literally made in retrospect, made in hindsight. Right.
And in conversation.
There's one more question in the back, and then hopefully all of you can meet the writers out in the wonderful cafeteria area.
Good afternoon. I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I want to greet you with Ashe.
Ashe.
And when you were talking about the role of the archive and the different components and the things of it being living, I couldn't help but think about when it comes to, like, saying a scientific experiment, the very aspect of observing it can change it.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
If you want to care to expound on that, that's what I have to say. And again, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you respond to that?
Well, I don't know much more to add to that. I mean, of course, like that's what I mean by the archive is living, right? And we are evolving every day, right? So then the archive should also evolve, right? It should have seasons, it should have chapters, like, you know, like a book, right? So if we think about creating archives from this perspective of living, I think maybe it won't be such of a task. People think of it as like, oh, I gotta get organized. That means I gotta, you know, but remember, it starts with care. Just like we care because we got the new dress or those new shoes, we make sure that they're, you know, have a space in the closet, and you know, the handbags got a shelf. All that's, you got to do the same thing with everything that you consider part of the archive.
Indeed. Yeah.
I want to thank you all for being here, witnessing, archiving, dialoguing, rhetoricing with us. Thank you for BCLF. And again, I'm going to use privilege to shout out my family's living archive. My Auntie Marge is here.
Yes.
And she never minds me telling people that lady is going to be 92 in November. Okay.
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
All right, Auntie Marge.
Right.
So talking about care, I'm like, Auntie Marge, you have to come, and we're going to love upon you. All right. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Hello, hello, can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, so thank you very much to this wonderful panel. Thank you so much. We do apologize for the tech, but you know computers.
That's
right.
They do what they want.
No worries.
Man against the machine.
No, it's absolutely fine.
So we want to show our appreciation, of course, by giving you all your flowers.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And because we have a tech excuse and we want time to fix it before we close off, we will not be running the film Ancestral Memory by Natusha Cruz, because it was a 32-minute film and we would have loved to have you all see it, but we do have to fix it before we close off. So what we will do once we get the other computer set up, we will try to run Malene's YouTube video.